Great Britain and South Africa.
This photo shows one of the goals of the British in Africa, which was spreading Christianity. Missionaries such as the ones in this photo were used to justify imperialism in Africa. This photo also shows the differences in status between white Christians and native Africans through economies of scale. The Europeans are all above the Africans, either standing or sitting on a bench. The Africans are sitting or kneeling on the ground, showing their lower social standing.
Britain thought they could better the Boers and Africans' lives by building their form of civilization. They thought they had a white man's burden, per se, to fix and rule over other countries, specifically ones that were barbaric in nature, according to them. This picture shows the British pointing the Boers and Africans towards a rising sun, which represents British culture and their desire to spread their ideas. Chamberlain believed that the Africans were barbaric and inferior, and that it was justified to use force to destroy their practices. He claims that it was necessary to advance British society at the expense of the Africans. This quote demonstrates social Darwinism, which is the belief that superior cultures will destroy weaker cultures, as Chamberlain says that the demise of some people will lead to prosperity to others.
In this article, Charles A. Conant makes the argument that imperialism is the result of a natural law of economic and race development. This is social Darwinism, because he is saying that races will naturally try to expand and conquer weaker races. It is not unethical because it is natural. There are also elements of the white man's burden, where he talks about developing the decadent nations of the world, which is a part of the white man's burden.
This map shows how and where the British colonized in South Africa. In 1795, the British landed in Cape Town and fought the Dutch in the Battle of Muizenberg, which helped them acquire Cape Colony. About 50 years later, Natal was annexed by the British. In 1879, a failed attempt to colonize was the Zulu Wars, where they fought the Zulu and lost to them. A little later, in between 1880 and 1881, the First Boer War occurred, which the Boer states won their independence. A little bit later, in 1899 to 1902, the Second Boer War occurred, which the British won, and the Boer states were colonized by the British. Britain mainly used military expansion to colonize. Britain had an indirect rule over South Africa. After winning the Second Boer War, the British didn't have enough troops to govern and to kick out the Boers from their land. Instead, they integrated them into their government and economy. The British influenced the government from afar, controlling laws and currency.
From 1835 to 1840, the Boers underwent a great trek to flee from the British, as they had introduced new policies the Boers did not like, mainly the emancipation of slaves. The Great Trek led the Boers to the Orange Free State and Transvaal, but their attempted escape was short-lived, as when gold and diamonds were discovered about 30 years later in the Boer republics, the British flocked to the opportunity of wealth. As the British came to the newly formed Boer republics, due to the allure of gold and diamonds, the Boers fought back against their imperialist adversaries. This resulted in discrimination towards the Boers and concentration camps that were put in place that killed thousands.
These primary sources show the British side of the Zulu Wars. The newspaper article describes the heavy casualties that were inflicted on both sides, and how the Zulu were not able to mount an effective defense against the British, even though they eventually lost the war. The rest of the article proves how large the Zulu resistance was, claiming that the Zulu had a force of 20,000. This was more than just an uprising, this was an organized, widespread resistance.
This quote shows the Zulu side of the war. The Zulus were becoming increasingly angry at the British, since they were stealing the Zulus' land, animals, and food. Finally, with help via weapons from gun suppliers that were common at the time, the Zulus fought back. Despite an initial victory, the Zulus eventually lost the war, and the British began colonization in their territory.
One of the major pushes to colonize southern Africa was the copious amounts of gold and diamond mines residing in that area. Some context for the chart: southern Africa was colonized around 1902 and a little bit before that, after the Boer Wars. In this chart, you can see that the output of gold in Africa increased significantly, around 20 million pounds, after the earlier half of the 17th century. The most obvious reason for this increase in gold output is the colonization of southern Africa, and based on these numbers, we can tell that the gold was a very valuable currency.
Because gold was so valuable and Great Britain had a huge influx of it thanks to the imperialization of the South African colony, Great Britain's economy greatly benefited. Before 1870, Great Britain's GDP was 100,179, but in 1913, after gaining the colony of South Africa, it increased about double to 224,618. The addition of the South African gold into Britain's economy undoubtedly led its economy to skyrocket between 1870 and 1913.
An example of someone who gained a great fortune from the South African colony is Cecil Rhodes. Growing up, he was very poor in health, which debarred him from any professional career. Fortunately, he moved to Kimberley in 1870 to work a farm that failed, but made it later on in the diamond mines. He mainly gained his fortune from diamond production by managing a trust organization of mines. He also made the De Beers Mining Company, but he is most known for being the Prime Minister of the Cape Colony.
Cecil Rhodes can be found in this image, the Rhodes Colossus, and this image depicts him stretching from Cairo to Cape Town, and it was an advertisement for support of a railroad to connect the two cities.
Once gold and diamonds were discovered in South Africa in the 1870s or 1880s, interest in the region increased into more than just a stop on the naval road into India, into a target for economic exploitation. Mines were often led and skilled labor was performed by white people, while Africans did much of the manual labor. Access to these valuable materials economically benefited Great Britain greatly, but was to the detriment of the native South Africans. This article from Britannica is about the gold and diamond mining in South Africa. It has quite a lot of good information about the topic, but I'm going to focus on the gold mining. South Africa provided almost a third of the global gold supply. It was very lucrative, but it came at a cost to the workers. To be profitable, the mining had to be intensive and deep level, which is dangerous to the miners. The mining companies worked together to reduce competition over labor and keep costs down. The miners also had to live in overcrowded compounds. It was overall an exploitative system that benefited the economy of Great Britain at the cost of the well-being of the workers.
The British were attempting to annex Transvaal in order to gain better access to the copious amounts of gold, which would give them an economic edge over competing European imperial powers. However, the Boers wanted to maintain their simple farming lifestyle, which was endangered due to the growing gold industries. In response, they levied new laws that prohibited certain rights of British foreigners. Conflicts such as these would spark the wars such as the First Anglo-Boer War. Agricultural and trade depressions, such as the Long Depression, spurred the emigration of British farmers to other areas. Many of them were searching for better economic opportunities, with most becoming farmers, factory workers, or miners. These depressions contributed to the widespread British diaspora that occurred in the late 1800s and early 1900s.
This advertisement shows the transportation between Britain and her South African colonies. Steamships were the primary means of transportation because they were the most efficient way to travel long distances by sea.
The allure of gold and other riches was one of the main appeals of South Africa for Europeans. As more immigrants moved in, more boomtowns popped up, such as Johannesburg, and even more businesses were created. Soon after, railroads and telegraphs were created, which caused an even larger influx of people. Johannesburg soon even surpassed Cape Town in population. British miners came to South Africa in order to gain riches, such as gold, diamonds, and other minerals. While some became leaders of giant mining corporations, such as Cecil Rhodes, most became simple workers. The diamond business was extremely profitable and provided jobs for some of the British immigrants. European workers were put in more intelligent jobs, quote unquote, more often, while Africans were primarily in the actual mines. The British immigrants, or Uitlanders, were outcasted by the Boers, who were against the mining the British did. The Uitlanders had fewer rights, and the gold industry was taxed heavily by the Boer government. Disagreement between the Boers and the incoming British immigrants were another cause of the Anglo-Boer Wars.
Alright, so this is a prototypical experience of a British immigrant in South Africa. This is not a real person, but he's just an example of a typical situation for British immigrants in South Africa. Joseph Walters was born in 1865 in Liverpool, Great Britain. His parents were farmers, and he had to help out on the farm for most of his life. In the midst of an agricultural depression in 1890, Walters decided to abandon his parents and pursue a mining career searching for newly found gold in South Africa. He embarked on the RMS Dunatar Castle, which would take him to Durban, South Africa. From there, Walters traveled to Johannesburg, an up-and-coming mining town, and decided to get a job in the mining industry. However, he soon found himself being oppressed by the Boers, as they refused to give him citizenship because he was both foreign and a miner. Over time, the infrastructure of the town became increasingly industrialized, until there were telegraphs and railroads. Walters, now in a higher position at the company, was becoming angrier with Boers due to their harsh taxes on gold and mining supplies. After many years of tension between the Boers and Uitlanders, the Second Anglo-Boer War broke out, which eventually resulted in a victory for the British. Walters used this opportunity to quickly gain more territory to mine in, which caused even more money to flow into the company's coffers. Walters amassed a reasonable amount of wealth, and was luckier than most other British immigrants, who never moved up the corporate ladder. He never married or had children.
A major product that changed South Africa significantly and made South Africa very wealthy was the discovery of a vast amount of diamonds. Diamonds completely transformed the face of South Africa and were the main cause for the rapid industrialization of the colony by the British. As seen in the source above, huge mines began to appear in South Africa as a result of British imperialism. Because of the boosted economy, South Africans were able to live much more comfortably in the new, extremely wealthy environment. In addition, the diamond industry provided new jobs and new opportunities for individuals to become rich, similar to the California gold rush in 1848, which is why numerous British citizens immigrated to South Africa, like Cecil Rhodes. New major companies appeared, like the De Beer Mining Company, as well as many trust organizations for mines that had heavy influence on the economy and introduced an increased working class in South Africa. Clearly, the British imperialism of South Africa and the diamond appeal introduced an increase of capitalist influence while emerging major diamond companies and new jobs. Furthermore, the diamond industry made South Africa a very wealthy and prosperous country, which directly had a positive impact on the living conditions of the citizens in South Africa. And here are our sources.